Hello and welcome. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Steph.
And we are your hosts for the Star Trek Deep Space Nine Par Mach cast.
Par Mach, of course, being the Klingon word for love.
Because on this podcast, we believe that love will save the world.
And that the Deep Space Nine crew are all in a massive polyamorous relationship web.
That too. Hello and welcome back to another fine installment of your favorite Star Trek podcast.
Yeah, boy.
You're here with ya boys, Steph and Jamie. Well, I don't know how much I love that. I'm not a boy, but I am a Trek, and
I'm a boy
that's
with
what we're.
an I.
Yes, yeah. We'll go with that. A BOI. The boys are back in town, and we are here to talk about Deep Space Nine, Episode 6, Q-Less.
Q-Less.
How you doing today, Steph?
I'm fabulous. How are you?
I'm good. I'm feeling Q full. I feel like my Q pitcher is just, yeah, exactly. I don't know why we have to frame this all as a scarcity mindset, Star Trek.
I thought we were living in a post-scarcity world.
Exactly. But I guess that is the tension with Q, right? Is,
That's
you know,
true.
what have humans made of their post-scarcity world?
So true. So true, bestie.
What flavor of episode do we have going on here with our Q-Less?
I think we definitely have the classic terrible hotel guests in space.
Mm-hmm. They roll up, they ruin everything, and then they head out by the time the credits roll. It's very, straightforward. The only note I had about that is I guess that Q is kind of his own flavor of Trek episode at this point, but not for Deep Space Nine. So we've got...
for TNG, there are definitely the Q episodes.
Yes, where you know it's like, oh, we're not going to get any work done today. Q has shown up. All right, anything that you would like to go over before we dive into the recap of this week? Thoughts, feelings, impressions about the episode generally?
I think it was really interesting to watch a Deep Space Nine Q episode.
Yeah.
Especially because I haven't watched TNG for a while now.
Oh, I forgot about that, yeah.
Like when I watched the first season of Deep Space Nine, I had finished TNG not long before.
But
so
now...
I was still kind of in the Q mode, but now it feels different.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It was interesting. Up front, I'm going to say, I don't know how well it felt like it worked. I enjoyed the episode quite a bit, but I think something that is very much underestimated here and is maybe like a natural byproduct of like the fact that these shows are made as like consumable content to make money. They're not thought of like as art. And so we're not necessarily like thinking about like artistic considerations all the time. But like for me, Q is very much a narrative foil to Picard. So it doesn't really make sense to do a Q story without Picard. But I can also see them looking at it and just being like, these are characters that inhabit a world and like we can bring them in, whatever.
And I think it's still sort of tying in other Trek in the way that we talked about, like with the pilot and like Miles, and it's like, here are some familiar faces.
And then we get the Duras sisters. Yeah, it feels very like for season one, they're trying to like...
to still sort of connect.
We inhabit the world of the Trek. Enterprise. And yeah. Which I get the desire. I just am not totally sure how much I think it works in this episode.
I still had fun.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Anytime you get John Delancey as Q, it's just a delight.
You know what's so funny is I was actually introduced to him through Breaking Bad.
Really? I didn't know he was in Breaking Bad. I have not watched it.
Phenomenal. And it's this very dramatic storyline. And
I
so
love that.
was introduced to him as this very like dramatic, serious actor, and like he was amazing, just incredible. Like, spoilers, but it's a very tragic storyline that he has. Also, Breaking Bad came out like more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, spoilers for a 10-year-old show. I mean, I haven't seen it, but
we're also watching Deep Space Nine, so it's spoilers for a 30-year-old show.
Right.
But that was my first introduction to him.
That's wild.
And so then I saw him as Q, and I was just like, oh, this is fucking delightful. Like,
I can't imagine John Delancey in a situation where he's not like a gleeful agent of cosmic chaos.
He's incredible. He's a phenomenal actor.
I'm gonna have to at least check out those episodes.
The first 2 seasons is where it's
like
really
most
just
strongly.
season 2. You can kind of focus on season 2.
Okay. Great to know.
Yeah.
That's wild.
John Delancey, shout out.
Shout out. Absolutely. We love the man. We love the myth. We love the legend. All right. So this episode was directed by Paul Lynch, teleplay by Robert Hewitt Wolfe, and it was released on February 3rd, 1993, another Saturday.
February 6th, 1993.
6th. Thank you.
Want to do that again?
Nah, it's holding myself accountable.
All right.
February 6th.
It's fascinating to me that it's Saturday releases for episodes.
Yeah, well, it's going to go back to being Sunday, I think, soon, and then Sunday will be our day. So I don't know why it keeps doing that. I do think it's possible that football was something that they're having to work around.
Maybe,
but I don't know.
That's true. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we open on Julian in the Replomat telling a very dramatic story about what he calls the toughest battle of my life to a pretty Bajoran woman. As Julian talks, we see Miles sitting at a table in the background. As it becomes clear that the story Julian is telling is about his medical school final exams, Miles visibly rolls his eyes.
This fucking twink. And is this woman under the impression that Julian has money or something? Because this story does not feel as impressive as she seems to be behaving it like it is. I get he's cute, but come on.
He's just, I don't know if we're supposed to well, I'll get to this in a minute after we've talked a little more.
Okay.
But so Julian tells his date that his story exemplifies the stuff that salutatorians are made of, which causes the woman to wonder aloud why he only made salutatorian.
Yep, and Bashir scrambles to explain that during the oral exam, he mistook a pre-ganglionic fiber for a post-ganglionic nerve, and that if it had not been for that trick question, he would have been the valedictorian. And first of all, the way he grabs her hands and holds it here is so weird. It's like he's trying to, telepathically induce her to believe this bullshit story he's giving her. And I also just can't believe that Julian screwed up his orals. That's so out of character for him.
Right? He's not perfect. What?
I was making an oral sex joke, but that too.
Oh, also that. Yeah. What is so funny to me here is I don't know if this is supposed to be convincing flirting and it's actually working, or we're supposed to think that Julian is a moron who has no idea how to actually flirt.
I kind of felt like it's both, where it's Julian's clearly a moron who has no idea how to actually flirt, but for some reason, this girl's really into it. And I feel like we get that a lot, where it's I don't know if the idea is supposed to be that he's a doctor, so he's a little bit of a rock star, or if it's just he's a young officer and people are into that. But I do feel like we get a lot of beats where he is clearly behaving embarrassingly. His coworkers are embarrassed by him, but we do have a hot girl there inexplicably into it for some reason.
Yeah, and as they walk out, which we'll get to in a second, but he's like, the Starfleet medical exams get her every time. I'm like, does it?
Do they really, my man? I mean, I guess that is
that your game?
The cultural context of the 21st century. Maybe that is really
hot stuff.
If we're living in a context when reputation is currency, maybe telling your boring stories about med school really is what gets them all hot and bothered down there. I don't know. Maybe we should try it out here in the 21st century. Surely that would be an improvement over what we're doing now. So at least something where we're valuing intellect and hard work would be awesome. So Julian begins to tell her more about this story, and Commander Sisko Katsamovin calls both Bashir and O'Brien to landing pad 5. And so we go to the docking hatch. Sisko and Major Kira are desperately trying to open the door to the runabout USS Ganges. They explain that the Ganges has lost all power. Oxygen levels are dropping dangerously low since the ship emerged from the wormhole. Meanwhile, Dax and an NPC named Ensign Polly are trapped inside.
I just love that Kira's well, we'll burn through it then. Always the direct approach. I love that about her.
I realized after, on my second watch, that she pulled out her phaser.
Yeah.
But when I was like, did you just have a blowtorch, in your pocket for this, just such an occasion?
I wouldn't put that past O'Brien. I wouldn't expect Kira to have one.
Well, because he would have it for work and she would have it for pleasure. And so...
It's in case she has to torture Cardassians.
Right, which, comes up occasionally
happens,
when you're Major Kiranerys.
It does.
Also, apologies so much to our beautiful audience. I am recovering from being sick a couple weeks ago, and I am fine now, but my voice does still sound a little bit murdery. I've been guzzling tea just for you guys, so hopefully it's not too bad. But in case you're just like, wow, they really sound awful today. I know, I understand. We're pushing through it.
Awful.
Oh, thanks, babe. So, O'Brien tells Kira to hand him an EPI capacitor, which will re-energize the servos and thus open the door hatch. While O'Brien works, Julian scans the ship with his medical tricorder and determines that there is an additional passenger trapped inside. No way that'll be important.
Definitely not. So Miles finally gets the hatch open with assistance from Sisko and Kira. The crew boards the Ganges, where O'Brien helps the mysterious third passenger to her feet. Upon seeing her face, Miles recognizes her from his time aboard the Enterprise as Vash, a friend and former lover of Captain Picard.
Vash! We love Vash!
She's so fun.
She's so fun. We had seen her in 2 episodes of TNG before this. In case you want to go check them out, they are season 3, episode 19, Captain's Holiday, and most recently season 4, episode 20, Cupid. That's Q. Pid.
Yeah.
She and Captain Picard are both very horny for archaeology and for each other.
I love that so much for them.
It's beautiful.
It is. O'Brien asks how she got on board, and Dax replies that they found her in the Gamma Quadrant, where she has been living the last 2 years.
Very suspicious.
Sus as hell. Sisko advises Julian to take everyone to the infirmary, and on their way, O'Brien asks how Vash got to the Gamma Quadrant by herself, and she replies only that a friend, quote, dropped her off.
Mm-hmm.
As everyone leaves for the infirmary, a uniformed officer, seemingly working on repairing the shuttle, turns around, revealing himself to be none other than
Q! And every time now that Q shows up, now that all I can hear in my head after having watched Lower Decks is Tawny Newsome as Beckett Mariner going, "Get out of here, Q! No, we are done with random stuff today. We are not dealing with any of your Q bullshit." Which is so funny, but also, yes, exactly the correct response to Q showing up.
We don't have time for your shenanigans.
We simply do not. Oh, yeah, by the way, who is Q anyways? Q is a character from TNG originating in the pilot episode Encounter at Farpoint, an all-powerful cosmic entity and narrative foil for Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Q puts humanity on trial, judging their worthiness to travel the stars. Over time, his trials have started to feel extra personal, and he becomes very obsessed with his trial subjects, specifically his captain, Captain Jean-Luc.
Mon Capitaine.
Mon Capitan. All right, theme song. And in the infirmary, Bashir is scanning Vash and finds her to be in perfect health for someone who has just been in the Gamma Quadrant for 2 years. And is it just me, or did they put her in like a sexy outfit?
Vash is always in a sexy outfit.
But she had like a thick like jacket on before, and now it's like this like low cut, like sort of like sparkly crop top. And I'm like, good for you, girl.
She layered.
Yeah.
So Vash tells Bashir that the Gamma Quadrant is hardly uncivilized because he's like, you haven't been in civilization.
Yeah.
And that some of the cultures she encountered there date back millions of years.
Julian Frontier Medicine Bashir over here.
And despite his desperate attempts to flirt, Julian can't find any genuine medical reasons to keep Vash in the infirmary, and she leaves.
Okay. So here she puts back on the jacket over this. So I guess she was always wearing the sexy tank top under her jacket, which is very in character.
You never know when you might have to whip out a sexy outfit.
For sure. But I do believe that Julian Bashir is the kind of doctor that would offer his patients a wide variety of hospital attire options, and that at least one of those options would be sexy. So I stand by it.
So this scene, in contrast to the opening, is good flirting. The opening scene is so weird. I think maybe it's that Vash is good at flirting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, it's more her driving this than Julian.
Right. He lobs one at her, and then she takes it and does, like, the most alluring thing with, like, her eyes or whatever. And you're like, oh, okay, all right. Yeah. Something's happening here.
I do love, as she leaves, Julian's little, like, exhale, like, whew. And I'm like, same.
What a woman, yeah.
What a woman.
And so in Sisko's office, Sisko debriefs Dax about her mission and about their new guest. Dax tells Ben that Vash seems to have no knowledge of the Bajoran wormhole, and so she must have been transported to the Gamma Quadrant by some other means. Sisko orders Dax to look into Vash's background, beginning with her claims to be an archaeologist. And I do just feel like someone on the Enterprise fucked up here, because it absolutely should have ended up in a report somewhere that Vash went to the Gamma Quadrant with Q at the end of the last episode she was in.
Like, literally.
Like, that was the last time we saw her.
Last time we saw her, she was like, all right, deuces with Q.
Going off to probably cause problems on purpose, as Q is wont to do.
As Q is wont to do. And no one wrote that down?
They're not, like, on a list of, like, known associates?
Yeah, like... What kind of system are they working with here?
Come on, Starfleet. So then we cut to the station's assay office, where Vash brings in the valuable objects that she acquired in the Gamma Quadrant for safekeeping while she's on the station. The final item that she stores in her space safety deposit box is a large ovoid chunk of amber-colored crystal, which the station assayer notes to be unlike anything he'd ever seen before. And I just have to pause... What is going on with the evaluation criteria
I don't
here?
know.
So as they're like putting stuff in the box, the assayer is doing like a vocal inventory, like telling the computer what they're putting in there. And we go from him describing a statue where he specifies it's made of stone, it's this tall, it's approximately this weight, blah, 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 to assorted gems, just a bag of gems. Bag. No need to take them out of the bag and look at them or anything.
Just assorted.
Just an assortment. I also do really wish that this man ever showed up again, because he seems extremely weird, and I feel like could have been a fun addition to the overall dynamic, like maybe a third for Quark and Odo.
I see it.
If they're in the market. But sadly, we never see him again.
Also, of course, her things are kept in sparkly bags.
Oh, it's a great bag.
Great bag. And so she leaves the assay office, having locked up all her various finds. And she runs into Cisco, who tells her he's disappointed to hear that she'll be leaving the station the following day, as the Federation's top scientists have been eager to question her about her experiences in the Gamma Quadrant.
And this diva, just as they're walking, without saying anything, hands her bag to Ben to carry. And I love Vash. I love women.
So true, bestie.
So Ben specifically mentions a Professor Wu from the Daystrom Institute wanting to speak with Vash, which makes her laugh, revealing that Professor Wu was responsible for the suspension of her membership to the Institute's Archaeological Council over the sale of stolen artifacts.
I mean... Who amongst us hasn't sold a precious artifact?
Who amongst us that work at a museum hasn't stolen a precious artifact?
At a museum. So Vash agrees to make a one-time exception to her rule, prioritizing profit and personal enrichment over scientific advancement, to go back to Earth and speak to the Daystrom scientists, as it has been over 12 years since she visited her homeworld. Cisco promises to arrange passage for her.
I always think it's so interesting when in a Trek they introduce human characters that are profit-driven. Like, I think sometimes there can be a reticence to do so because it can feel like it sort of challenges the veracity of the post-scarcity utopia of Earth and the Federation. But I think it makes so much more sense to acknowledge that there always would be people who would want more and to be driven to acquire more and explore what that would look like, right? Rather than just sort of like acting as though that's not part of the calculus. Because in Vash's case, I actually don't think she is super materialistic. I mean, she will reference several times throughout this episode spending most of her career in tents, sleeping in tents. I think for her, it's more of an extension of her desire for adventure and with the emotional walls that she's built up around herself. Like, she doesn't want to feel dependent on anyone. Hence, she has to feel like she has wealth so that she is dependent on the Federation, right?
She also lives outside of the Federation's purview in a lot of ways. So like out where you're not living in the post-scarcity Federation world, you do want money. Like,
right. But that's also a choice, right? Like, she could have lived anywhere on a Federation world, but chooses to go places where she has to depend on herself rather than on others. And I feel like that's a very specific character choice that I kind of enjoy.
Yeah. So we cut to O'Brien conducting repairs on the Ganges. Miles tells Cisco that he can't understand it, but that while the runabout has been drained of power, he can't find anything mechanically wrong with it.
Yeah, and Colm Meaney has this very specific sense of distress that he plays as Miles whenever he can't quite figure out a mechanical issue, and it's so good. There's just like this urgency, this like, he can't sit still. It's like he's shaking his leg, like he hates it when he can't figure out. Yeah, it's just a really good little acting beat from Colm. So leaving the runabout, Sisko asks O'Brien how well he knows Vash. O'Brien replies that he doesn't really know her at all, apart from the one time she was aboard the Enterprise. And Sisko says, well, what was she doing there? And O'Brien awkwardly explains that she was friends with Captain Picard. Close friends, if you follow my meaning.
They fucked.
O'Brien also tells Vash that, tells Sisko that Vash and Picard met on Risa, which, if you didn't watch TNG or are new to Trek, for context, Risa is the vacation sex planet.
We love the vacation sex planet.
O'Brien also has, the captain likes a good challenge, sir, which is a wild statement, Miles.
Truly wild thing to say about your former boss.
We're really just talking about JL's sex life in the most open way here, and I love that, but it is pretty wild for a work setting.
I do love that Ben seems a little impressed. He's kind of like, perhaps Jean-Luc fucks more than I previously believed.
He may have killed my wife, but
we expect a man who lays good pipe.
I can hold space for the lyrics of Defying Gravity in this moment. That's for the first time.
Truly. All right. So after they've discussed Jean-Luc's sex life, suddenly the power goes out in the corridor that O'Brien and Sisko are standing in. The power returns, and they quickly make their way to Ops, where Sisko asks for a status report. Dax tells him that the station suffered a broad-spectrum power drain, exactly like what happened on the Ganges. Dun, dun, dun!
But we don't have time for that now because we cut to to O'Brien escorting Vash to her quarters in the habitat ring. And we have a line here where Vash says, as an archaeologist, I've spent my life living in tents. The Cardassian bed's not going to bother me. And it's like, well, Vash, why do you need a ton of money then? Go to therapy, girl.
Girl, the therapy.
Vash asks Miles about Jean-Luc and tells him that now that she's back in the Alpha Quadrant, she's going to have to look him up. And Miles looks so uncomfortable because he knows what that means.
Like,
we just established what that means in the immediately preceding scene. That's a good setup.
So he leaves Vash to get settled in her quarters, and then she is almost immediately interrupted by the sudden arrival of Q. He tells her he cannot believe that she is still pining after Jean-Luc, that self-righteous do-gooder.
I just said, LMFAO, you're one to talk, Gaylord.
Q, literally all you do is pine for Jean-Luc. Q.
So the thing we got to establish here, Q is gay.
Yeah, that's a gay continuum.
That's a gay continuum, and is specifically gay for Jean-Luc Picard. And so that's one of the reasons we're going to get into it throughout this episode, but that's one of the reasons why this episode just doesn't quite work in that way. I mean, my read on it is everything about the Q-Vash relationship is about Jean-Luc, right? And it's just like, I am here to mess with your girlfriend.
I am stealing my boyfriend's girlfriend.
Yeah, I am stealing my boyfriend's girlfriend. Exactly. So that feels like it's a very important subtext piece to address for this episode.
Arguably not even subtext.
No, true. And so Vash tells Q that she should have listened to Picard when he warned her about Q, but Q just brushes her off, saying he realizes now it was wrong of him to leave her stranded in the Gamma Quadrant. And, they quibble back and forth for a moment about who left whom, and, before Q reveals that he wants to get back together and resume exploring the galaxy together. Vash flatly refuses, and they argue back and forth some more about each other's less than stellar reputations. And speaking to what we were just sort of talking about, I think it's so endlessly funny how this episode is structured like there's a romantic relationship between Vash and Q that has ended, or this is a breakup when, honey, he's gay. He is the gayest Q in the continuum. This is all about his boyfriend. He's obsessed with stealing his boyfriend's girlfriend. Why do you think he only cared to show up to be in your life again when you got back from the Gamma Quadrant and were like, I'm gonna look up Jean-Luc?
He's like, oh no.
Yeah.
She's in the same quadrant as my boyfriend.
I also love this exchange where Vash says, they weren't exactly thrilled to see you on Brax either. What did they call you? The god of lies? And Q says, they meant it affectionately.
The two of them have excellent chemistry.
Really good chemistry, for sure.
I don't necessarily read it as a romantic relationship. I read it as a sexual relationship.
Okay.
Which you can have sex with people and also be gay.
100%. Yeah. But I don't know that I think that they have had sex.
No?
I feel like it's very he's interested in one thing in this relationship, and it's not her pussy. That's just not. I feel like there's a lot of, and I think she knows that, right? Like, and that's kind of what makes this funny, the way that they sort of dance around describing it like a romantic relationship. I don't know that she knows he's only with her because he's obsessed with Picard, but I think she knows he's not interested in her for that, you know?
Well, we welcome your interpretations, listeners. Send us an email.
Yeah, let us know what you think.
I do love also during their bickering, she's like, oh, like, you know everything. Q's like, but I do know everything.
Yeah. It just makes it more annoying.
Yeah. So funny. So the door chimes again, and Quark enters, only to be immediately teleported away by Q.
I love an omnipotent entity that does bits. The Robin Williams genie character from Aladdin was like my favorite fictional character as a child, and I feel like Q is the mean version of that. You know, like insert the mariachi gif from TNG here. And I just have a lot of affection for that character from that perspective.
Yeah. So Vash demands that Q return Quark, and he does, and he also disappears himself. The somewhat momentarily confused Quark tells Vash that he has heard that she has several items from the Gamma Quadrant that may have significant financial value. And he offers to organize an auction for these items in exchange for a 50-50 split of the profits.
Yeah.
Without skipping a beat, Vash grabs Quark by the lobes and massages him down to an offer of 22%.
Yeah, So, okay, I know at various points in the show, the umox, which is this like Ferengi sex thing of touching the earlobes, will sort of serve as a metaphorical stand-in for sex acts generally. But I gotta say, in this context, I think that this is very smart on Vash's part, because when you look at it literally, it's just touching the man's ears, which humans don't have any cultural weirdness about. So if that's all you have to do to get whatever you want, love that for you. Go ahead. Like
use that sexuality. Girl.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just love that the hottest thing a woman can say to Quark is that she wants gold pressed platinum.
100%.
You can like practically see him like jizz in his pants.
Yes, you really can.
Which just Armin Shimmerman, so good.
So good. So Quark leaves to organize the auction, and Q reappears, telling Vash that if Quark was the kind of man he was with before, no wonder she was attracted to Picard. Just then, the doorbell chimes and Q vanishes again. This time, it's Dr. Bashir who enters, asking Vash out to dinner at Quark's. And I just had, here goes Julian sticking his dick in the middle of the plot again.
As he is wont to do. So Vash accepts, but she asks him to wait for her so she can freshen up. And this is a bit that it's
so good.
Q appears over Julian's shoulder, and he's like mocking him. He's like mouthing words and like, look, like,
I'm just like, where were you during the salutatorian story? That's when we really needed you.
It's so funny. And so Julian leaves. Q makes fun of him. And Vash orders Q to leave her alone, telling him that she can take care of herself. And at this, Q says, really? Well, we'll see about that. And vanishes.
In the Replimat, Q approaches Julian in the form of a Bajoran waiter, telling him not to meet with Vash and that she is nothing but trouble. And I was wondering why the Replimat has waiters. I feel like this is never going to be a thing again because you order from the replicator.
Also, why is he not at Quark's? If they were going to have dinner at Quark's.
I guess they're going to meet at the Replimat and then walk to Quark's to get...
I guess.
Great question.
Continuity errors. It's fine.
So Bashir takes offense to this, which, you know, understandable, and tells Q that it's none of his business who he dates and that he will be having dinner with Vash quite soon. Q simply tells Bashir that he looks tired and gives a big, contagious yawn, using his powers to make Julian rush off to bed. And there's just this little moment where Julian goes, oh, maybe I should go lie down. And Q says, hopefully by yourself for a change, which is just such an old queen, and I love him.
Old bitchy queen. And just at that moment, Miles passes through the Replimat and immediately recognizes Q, whispering to himself, bloody hell.
Bloody hell.
But why did he not mention this before?
I don't think he saw him before this.
Yeah, but if he knew, like, the context.
Oh, that Vash went with Q?
Yeah, like...
I mean, I think the thing that we have to remember is that despite the fact that he was a main character of several episodes, on the Enterprise, O'Brien was more of a lower decker.
Yeah,
and so I'm like thinking about
true.
all of the times when it's like, how did Shax come back to life? No one's talking about, like... I don't know that he knew that Vash absconded with the devil to explore the galaxy.
And if nobody wrote it in a report...
Which it does not seem like they did.
He couldn't read it.
Yeah.
All right,
but good question. That's fair. So we cut back to Ops, where a very stressed out O'Brien is telling Sisko that Q is on board the station because he does know who Q is.
Yes. He got that much.
Kira plays the new audience stand-in, asking what the hell a Q is, so that Sisko can explain he's a powerful and extremely unpredictable life form that Starfleet has had dealings with in the past.
Well, and he mentions, like, there was a briefing about Q.
Yes, yeah,
Again, why are known associates not bad?
That's a great question. O'Brien suggests that Vash might know what Q is up to, explaining that Vash was present on the Enterprise at the time that Q transformed it into Sherwood Forest. Yes, you read that right. Insert Worf, I am not a merry man gif here.
So good. Classic.
Did you just write Sherwood Forest?
I just wrote Sherwood Forest because I love that episode and that
so
whole
good.
thing so much. I was just delighted. I was like, Sherwood Forest, so good. And just then, the station experiences yet another power drain. Miles suggests that since he can't find a mechanical explanation for the outages, that Q must be playing a game with them.
Miles, if I can't fix it, it must be the devil, O'Brien. That's Catholicism, baby.
The Catholicism do be hitting sometimes. And I just love that he's like, oh, he must be playing a game or a joke or whatever. And Ben's like, I'm not laughing.
That was great delivery. I love that. So we cut to Quark's, where Vash and Quark are discussing the pieces for the auction. Quark's trying to convince Vash to sell the large amber crystal to him for an insultingly low price when Sisko enters, demanding to speak to Vash. And I just wanted to give props to the way that this shot is lined up, where we sort of see Quark and Vash are very close to each other's faces. They're very much in the kiss or kill. And then Sisko walks in and inserts himself right in the gap between them.
Hello.
And it's just like, hi, this is about me now, actually. And it's a great shot. It's a great little directorial moment.
And Sisko asks Vash to tell him about Q, prompting a man at the bar to turn around and reveal that he was Q, telling Benjamin to ask him anything.
Wig reveal ass bitch. I also think in this area is where the way that Q starts taunting Benjamin about DS9 as being like a dismal command and it being something that Ben is, is he being punished for it or whatever, feels like it's the start of something we're going to see throughout the episode, which is Q as a mouthpiece for toxic fan reactions to the debut of Deep Space Nine. And I just kind of want to track that moving forwards because I think it's interesting.
That is interesting. I also just love the way Q is like... to get someone out of his way. I'm just like, oh, this bitch. I love him so much. It's
so good. Sisko orders Q to leave the station, but Q is enjoying toying with him and so changes his uniform to from the TNG style matching Picard over to the new DS9 style to match Sisko's. And in the process, he calls Deep Space Nine a dreary little gulag, which, bitch, he's so good.
He's so good.
He is the Sophia from Golden Girls of the Star Trek universe. Just always in the corner with something bitchy to say.
And I love it. He's like, oh, it needs a little color. And who better to provide that than moi?
Interior decorating. I'll be right there.
But Sisko is totally unimpressed by Q's power and bravado and demands that the power outages affecting the station stop. Q feigns offense at being blamed for the outages.
This is the part where Q turns to the audience and goes, now who remembers a little ditty called Encounter at Farpoint? Because it is the same plot, essentially. There's also the part where he goes, I was hoping for a little bit of witty repartee. At least Jean-Luc knew how to turn a phrase. And it feels, that one particularly feels like a repackaging of like racist dog whistle comments about Sisko. Just the like, I thought you'd be more articulate, that kind of thing, which I don't think means it's a racist comment from Q, but I feel like he's being used as a meta mouthpiece for stuff that is being said about the show and these characters, right?
I can see that. Yeah.
Sisko tries to get Q to agree to talk with him alone, but Sisko simply uses his powers to make everyone in the bar and everyone on the station disappear.
And he's playing into Sisko's rage, and he transforms the bar into a crowded boxing ring. Ding, ding! Challenging Sisko to hit him.
And I think that it is interesting and notable that even though he's obviously taunting Ben and trying to get him angry, his response to Ben's obvious extreme emotional distress at him making everyone disappear was in part to bring them all back. He's trying to get him riled up, but not trying to traumatize him.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking for little bits like that with Q of like, what is your real goal here? What is your real intention? Because everything with Q is drag. It's a performance. And so you're always kind of have to be like, what are you actually up to here? And I think he's much more altruistic at heart than he ever wants the humans to think he is.
Yeah. Q, who is now in a fabulous, like, 1800s mustache, dances
some
around
reason.
Sisko. He's talking about fisticuffs, and he's hitting him in the face repeatedly and challenging him to fight back. And Ben's just, what? It just made me laugh so much.
And over on the sidelines, Quark and Vash are wagering on the outcome, which I also thought was great. Tired of Q's bullshit, Benjamin finally hits him, knocking the omnipotent entity to the ground. And Benjamin's face here is so fucking good. He's just like, well, you fucked around.
Yeah,
like,
you found out.
It's not my fault. I also think the timeline of it probably doesn't quite make sense, but I have a headcanon now that Ensign Beckett Mariner, who we know served on Deep Space Nine, was in the audience that day, and that is where she learned how to handle Q and his fucking Q bullshit.
From the best, yes. She's like, well, Ben didn't fall in love with him, so...
Start there.
And yeah, the classic moment, bewildered and hurt, Q says from the ground, you hit me. Picard never hit me. And Sisko answers, I'm not Picard.
Mirthfully musing that Sisko's greater propensity for provocation is fortunate for him, Q vanishes in a flash. And this is one of those moments where the writers have talked about part of the point of introducing Q in this episode, in addition to just like fun character to play with, is emphasizing the differences between Sisko and Picard, right? This is very much a like, not your mama's Star Trek kind of moment. And I get the desire to do that. I do wish that we could have emphasized Ben's character in a way that wasn't just about not Picard, right? Like, I wish there was more that was affirmatively Benjamin in this interaction, but
we get a lot of affirmative Benjamin in other
absolutely,
episodes. So, yeah.
That just sort of came to mind, like thinking about the fact that that was sort of a goal for them with this.
So we cut to the promenade where various well-to-do aliens are arriving for Vash's auction. And as the crowd heads for Quarks, they catch, of course, the suspicious eye of Constable Odo, just as another power fluctuation strikes the station.
In Ops, the atmosphere begins to vent. Miles is able to restore atmosphere by raising the confinement shields, but notes that he's beginning to get emergency reports of hull fractures throughout the station.
I love just Miles, like, kind of generally talking to Q, like, Q, stop it. I'm like, he's not in the room, baby.
I love that, though, because I think he is the only one making the right assumption, which is that Q is always listening. Like, when he's not on the station, he is watching them on TV like we are.
On the QT.
Yeah, and, like, shouting at them on the TV, probably. So,
fair.
He seems cuckoo in the moment, but I think that's probably the right call.
That's fair. So investigating the site of one of the hull breaches, Dax scans with her tricorder and finds that the damage was caused by a focused graviton pulse. She asks whether it isn't time to open negotiations with Q before the next incident potentially destroys one of the power cores. But Sisko isn't convinced that Q is behind the power fluctuations.
Yeah, he has a line sort of saying, oh, that's not his style. And I just love Sisko has known this bitch for less than a day and already knows this is way too slow build for Q's big flashy ass. That's not how he rolls.
Q goes big.
And so we got to Odo's office where Quark has been summoned to meet with the constable. Odo tells Quark he knows all about the upcoming auction of the Gamma Quadrant artifacts, and they argue back and forth a bit about whose crime dong is bigger. And Odo has this line where he says to him, when are you going to realize you have no secrets from me? And you can literally feel Quark quiver. Like, yes, Daddy Goo.
And Odo laments that he fails to understand the purpose of spending a lifetime accumulating material possessions only to lose them in death. And Quark tries to get him to admit that he does understand desire by listing out some fine items he might want. And he starts with this, isn't there anything you desire as he moves closer.
I really thought for a second that this was Quark offering sexual favors to get out of a parking ticket. It really felt like that vibe.
I wouldn't put it past him.
Oh, no. He has done that in the past.
And although Odo he takes pause at the mention of a latinum-plated bucket to sleep in.
So fucking funny.
But he shakes off the idea with a characteristic Odo scoff.
Nothing brings this goo more joy in life than fucking with his gullible orange sub.
And the story's like, all right, we've had our dose of cop criminal flirting. Let's move on.
So, on the promenade, Vash has retrieved her things from the assay office and is headed off to the auction when Q intercepts her. Q makes one last appeal to Vash to go with him, implying that she owes him for keeping her safe for the last 2 years in the Gamma Quadrant.
I have to say, I love Vash's look here.
It's
the dress
good.
is great. The earrings into necklace combo.
It felt, the earrings into necklace combo feels very like they were trying to imagine like what could future jewelry or like jewelry in a different cultural context or whatever look like. And I think that's funny because those have become way more common now. Like people, you see people wearing that stuff all the time. And I'm like, good job, guys.
Yeah, chains connecting things and such.
Yeah. So Vash tells Q she doesn't require him or his protection, and Q uses his powers to painfully remind her of her various ailments of the various ailments that could have befallen her on those alien worlds had he not been there to heal her. Vash briefly transforms into a pale-skinned, balding, gray-haired old woman covered in painful lesions. Q departs, telling Vash to reconsider their so-called relationship, restoring her to health.
This feels especially dark to me for Q. And I guess he's always been kind of dark, but I think it feels darker because of the like romantic sexual relationship component.
Yeah. Well, and specifically, I feel like the dialogue of this moment evokes like relationship abuse in a way that other stuff has not. You gotta come crawling back to me. You need me to protect you. Like all of that.
It's very and I was like, am I feeling sensitive to this because I worked in that space and I'm like familiar with it, or is it feels like it's more sort of general, like, oh, this isn't funny, Q. This is like, ugh.
And it's interesting because that is a part of the character. It's just not a part of the character that we've seen on Deep Space Nine so far, because there is the Picard Q relationship is very much built on this idea of like, or this tension of like, I am an ant, you are a boot. At any point you could end me, and you know it, and you remind me of that all the time, and you jerk me around time and space, and it's very abusive in some ways, except for the fact that I'm the top. And you know that, and you're never gonna cross a certain line because you are obsessed with me.
Yes.
But with Vash, there is less of that. There's less of that safety and security.
And I also think gender plays into it.
100%. 100 million %.
Yeah.
Not to say that those things don't happen in gay
of
relationships,
course,
but
do.
it's very, especially in fiction, impossible to ignore that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that all of the extras with no idea what the fuck to do after this like whole ordeal has happened were really funny.
That was funny.
Like the one guy, he like tries to help her stand up, and then they're all just sort of staring at
Like,
her.
what the fuck was that?
I also read a thing just that the actress mentioned this specific scene as being like, she was like, I was in makeup for 8 hours and this was on screen for 4 seconds. I'm just so glad I wasn't cast as an alien. Like, I thought that was very funny.
It's true.
So we cut to ops where Sisko delivers a log reporting that the power drainage incidents have continued and that at this rate, they have 14 hours before the station's life support fails.
Dun, dun, dun.
O'Brien has so far been unable to track the drain on the power, citing imprecise Cardassian internal sensors. Dax suggests flooding the station with a highly diluted tritium gas, which would basically make the power drain easier to detect. This made me think of... Have you watched Avatar: The Last Airbender?
No.
Ugh.
I know.
Oh,
I know.
One of the best shows ever made. For those of you who have seen it, there is a scene in, I think it's the second season, where Sokka is helping this character, the Mechanist, try and find a gas leak. And they are realizing that if they the gas is odorless, and so they're having a hard time tracking it. And they're like, well, if we get sulfur and mix that in, we can follow the smell of the sulfur. And it feels very like, okay, we just have to release the sulfur and then we follow the smell back to that. I was like, good job, guys.
Yeah, you did it. I love that Miles has this line. He's like, the Cardassian sensors aren't sensitive enough. I'm like, yes, they have no empathy.
Fascist sensors are bad at their job.
Yep.
If they were tracking blood, I bet it would.
So Q suddenly appears to berate and belittle the command crew, telling them that Picard and his lackeys would have solved all this technobabble hours ago.
This feels like the most straightforward example of Q drawing like unfavorable meta comparisons between the two shows. And I love it. It's so good. I love the technobabble line.
Yeah.
That is excellent. I also really love the brief moment of Q and Kira interacting where he calls her a feisty little go-getter.
So good.
10 out of 10. She hates this man so much. She's using laser vision in her mind and frying him to bits.
It's so good. And then he calls Miles, weren't you one of the little people on the Enterprise, which is also so good. He also calls Benjamin Benji.
Which is perfect.
And just destroyed me.
He should have been calling him that this entire time, and he should the rest of the time, for sure. Ben, as usual, is not playing and tells Q to either tell him what's going on or get the hell out of his way. Q says he will tell them what's going on, but proceeds to complain about Vash conducting her auction in Quarks. Q tells Sisko then that Vash is a far more dangerous threat to DS9 than he is, and vanishes with a flash. We just get Q to the audience again. You watched Encounter at Farpoint, right?
We're all like, that was 7 years ago, Q. So we cut to Quark's, where the bar is filled with potential bidders. One of the guests threatens to throw Quark out an airlock if any of the merchandise turns out not to be genuine. But he assures the alien man that each piece comes with a certificate of authenticity signed by Vash, who he calls the Federation's foremost expert on the Gamma Quadrant.
That what immediately came to mind in that moment is the Parks and Rec thing where Ron just writes, I can do what I want. Ron?
Like, literally, like, he's like, a certificate of authenticity. I'm like, any bitch can sign that. Like,
and any bitch did. Like, truly. There's also this line where one of the bidders says to Quark, you obsequious toad. And I just think it's 10 out of 10. I looked up the word obsequious because I wasn't 100% sure. And anytime I find a word I'm not 100% sure and I look it up. So if you're curious, it means obedient or attentive to an excessive or servile degree, which very tracks. On point. And it just feels like the space version of Jane, you ignorant slut, which I really enjoyed. The makeup and prosthetic ridges around this alien's mouth is unfortunately extremely vaginal.
It is. Like, it's so cool. It's great work. Makeup prosthetics, but it looks like a vagina.
His nose is a clitoris. It's like, it's really bad. I don't know how no one caught that. I do want to point out, though, I love the design of the waiter in the background. There's like a yellow snake-like alien with a gold dress with gems on the shoulders, and the snake makeup, it like looks scaly, but also like it's just really cool looking. I really love this design, and I wish it was on screen for more than 2 seconds.
The aliens who come to bid on stuff generally are excellent design.
Yeah, they're
costume
cool looking.
and makeup are good. So Quark tries to sell Vash on the idea of a permanent partnership between them, but she tells him she's sick of sleeping in tents. Again, we hear about the tents, and is very much looking forward to a nice, quiet life back on Earth.
And Quark tells her she wouldn't last a month because she lives for adventure and profit, and he is right. I don't believe her for a second. Go to therapy, girl.
He clocked her. He clocked her so hard.
100%. Just then, the station shakes again. In ops, Kira reports that the increase to the graviton field is causing DS9 to be pulled out of its normal position. O'Brien suggests that since the graviton field is feeding off the station's power, that shutting down the reactors might cause the graviton field to weaken. So Sisko orders all the power cut, save for life support, but the station continues to move, heading directly to the wormhole. I gotta be so real. The Deep Space Nine crew low-key did kind of whiff this one. Like,
it's not great.
oh, the runabout inexplicably lost power. Now suddenly the same thing is happening to the station. What stuff came off the runabout and onto the station?
If only we had a list, like in some sort of assayer station.
Like a highly detailed list of what it weighs, or if it's assorted gems in a bag. Like, maybe we should go give all that stuff a quick scan. Quick scan, just to be on the safe side. But we didn't, so
we continue. And back in Quarks, the auction is continuing in the dark. We've got our, like, lights to guide you to the exit on, so it's kind of half dark in the bar. And the alien bidders are completely unaware of the station's impending destruction. Like, they sort of talk about evacuation a little bit at one point, but then they're like 3 minutes later in the episode from the wormhole. I'm like, bitch, you should have evacuated
by now. Yeah,
this.
The moment has passed.
But anyway, Vash introduces the first item, which is a statue from the Varanthan civilization in the Gamma Quadrant, and she's giving this lengthy spiel about the historical context of the artifact. And Quark interrupts, telling her that this isn't the Daystrom Institute, and begins to try to kind of gin up excitement by reminding the bidders that the artifact is beautiful, rare, and a Gamma Quadrant original.
This is so dumb. Quark is such a bad criminal, and all these people are such bad criminal artifact collectors. Like, the history and the culture context of the artifact are what makes it valuable.
Well, I think in this case, it could be people who just want to buy rare shit because they want to be able to own rare shit. Like, I feel like there are people like that on Earth now. Like,
I guess
they
that's
might not
fair.
understand a painting's provenance, but they're like, it's valuable and I want it.
I know other people are placing value on it. Therefore,
yeah.
Okay, that's actually very valid. Maybe I'm underestimating greed generally.
You're too you're too good to know these things.
Thank you.
And so then we're back in ops, and Miles reports that the tritium gas in the station's atmosphere has reached 1 part per million. So Dax initiates the sensor sweep. They manage to isolate the station's central core, but aren't able to find a more specific location. Kira reports that they have 18 minutes left until the station hits the wormhole. Like, girl, evacuate!
And they're like, what the hell could be pulling us into the wormhole? It's like, I don't know, maybe scan everything that came out from the wormhole! Like, we could be doing better.
For plot reasons, they have to be dumb.
Yeah. And I'm not saying they're not dumb. They are my beautiful idiots, but like, come on, guys. So back in Quark's, the first item sells for 36 bars of latinum, and Quark begins the bidding on the next item as Q looks on from the back of the bar. Just as Quark nets his first 50-bar bid, Q interrupts to tell the bidders that the station is currently hurtling towards certain doom in the wormhole, and they will likely not live long enough to enjoy their purchases. But please, carry on.
He's such a little shit. I love him so much.
Such a little shit.
So Quark attempts to calm his guests, and Vash confronts Q, telling him she can't believe he would kill all these people just to get back at her. And he admits that while the thought did occur to him, the station is in enough trouble without him.
Up in ops, Dax suggests a desperate plan of returning the station to full power. While this would undoubtedly accelerate their approach to the wormhole, Dax theorizes that a massive influx of energy might create a power drain large enough for them to trace. Seeing no other choice, Sisko orders O'Brien to bring the station to full power.
Back at the auction, Quark brings out the final item, the large amber-colored crystal. The crowd is clearly interested, and the bidding quickly reaches 600 bars of gold-pressed latinum. And I like that it's just like, it's sparkly.
So sparkly. In ops, with the station approximately 3 minutes from crashing into the wormhole, Jetsia identifies the source of the power drain as coming from the promenade, which also, like, that's the only part of the central core that anyone's ever in. So why did we check there first? Sisko leaves O'Brien in command and rushes off with Kira and Dax in tow.
In Quarks, the bidding has reached 2,500 bars of latinum. Q, being annoying on purpose, bets 2,501.
I really love his shit-eating grin here. He's having such a good fucking time. So Sisko's team arrives on the promenade with their tricorders and follow the readings to Quarks. The alien bidder with the vagina mouth makes his final offer of 3,000 bars, which Q counters with an offer of 1 million bars and puts his little pinky on the corner of his mouth.
I just love how Dax, Ben, and Kira all have their tricorders pointed like full extension of their arm. Like, Lord, they're scanning, buddy.
They look like they're playing Pokemon Go.
They really do.
So just as Quark is closing the sale, Sisko's team approaches the podium, and Dax identifies the crystal as the source of the power drain.
Who knew?
Shocker.
Dax tells Sisko she's reading a massive graviton buildup within the crystal and that they need to get it off the station. Sisko removes his comm badge and places it on the box containing the crystal, orders O'Brien to shut down the reactors and beam the comm badge into space with the crystal 500 meters off the docking.
We love beaming shit into space around here.
Beam. And Lord, they beaming.
So as the object rematerializes out in space, it begins to glow, and a manta-like creature, seemingly composed of living light, hatches from within, flying off into the wormhole and back to the Gamma Quadrant.
Sparkly space manta ray.
The manta CGI is admittedly not the best ever, but it is pretty.
It's
and
pretty.
The light show when it transforms is actually very pretty. And again, Q turns to the audience. I told you to watch Encounter at Farpoint.
So with everything back to normal, Vash is preparing to leave DS9 for Earth. While she sits at the bar and has a drink, Quark entices her with news that a Rokai provincial capital has been uncovered at Tartarus 5. Vash is tempted, but decides not to go. She has her mind set on Earth.
Mm-hmm. Q appears again, calling Earth an abysmal place, although admitting that it once had a lot of character, what with events like the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, Watergate, and... I just had LOQ, shut up. You love Earth so much because that's where Jean-Luc is from. Like, why do you know what Watergate is? That's crazy.
I just love the combination of the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, and Watergate. Like, the Crusades and Spanish Inquisition were, like, very violent, like these, religious wars and violence. And the Watergate is, like, this one little political scandal.
I mean, it wasn't great, but...
It wasn't great, but it wasn't the Spanish Inquisition. Like, if we're putting the two...
No one expects Watergate.
The Watergate Inquisition.
Oh my God. Although someone should have expected the Watergate Inquisition, to be so fair. But yeah, no, yeah, it's funny.
A hilarious combo. Q tells Vash she would be much happier exploring Tartarus 5 instead of being on Earth, but she tells him she will happily settle for just getting her life back.
Yeah.
And he begrudgingly agrees to leave her and admits he is going to miss her.
Yeah, he has this kind of great line where he says, "When I look at a gas nebula, all I see is a cloud of dust. Seeing the universe through your eyes, I was able to experience wonder. I'm going to miss that." And it's a very nice sentiment, but it's also like, Q, you literally just missed Jean-Luc. This is so funny. So, with a flash of light, Q vanishes again. And as Quark passes by, Vash forcefully grabs him by the ear and asks him for the quickest way to Tartarus 5.
So good.
I don't think she ever really let herself believe truly that she wanted to go back to Earth. I think she just thought it would help get rid of Q because he pretends to hate it so much. She's like, "Oh, sorry, I am going to Earth. I know you hate it over there, so I guess we're probably not going to see each other anytime soon."
Quark leads her away, or she leads him away, arguably. And just as a yawning Julian stumbles into the bar, having just woken up from his Q-induced slumber, he walks up to Dax and says, "Did I miss something?"
And we end on the $10 million smile of Terry Farrell. Not a bad way to go out at all.
Not at all. Roll in credits.
Roll credits. What an episode.
Truly. An adventure.
Mm-hmm. All right. So now we're going to head into our final analysis where we break down the episode, talk about the whole thing. What did we think? You want to start off? Do you want me to?
I think you've got some good thoughts.
Okay.
You started off.
Well, just to begin with, I will say I think we're still dealing with a lot of the same pacing problems that we've been dealing with so far this season, where it's just like a mad dash rush to the finish line of like building energy, building action, all of that. And then the manta, and then it's over.
We're good.
Yeah.
Everything's back to normal.
Which, is not inherently bad, but when it's every single episode, it starts to feel a little repetitive, a little like, is that all you can do?
Yeah.
And I know there will be a lot of episodes that break this mold, but it's kind of wild that like 6 episodes in, we still haven't gotten one that didn't really feel exactly like that.
It's really interesting too, I think, because it feels very episodic in the way that other Trek shows before Deep Space Nine were. Like, original series, TNG, it's like, well, we solved that, never to be spoken of again, because they weren't serialized.
Yeah,
and
something new every week.
We get used to the serialized version or serialized future seasons. I mean, this one was serialized, but it's not an ongoing story in the same way that later seasons
No,
are.
definitely not.
And so when you're watching Trek, that's kind of a Trek thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it makes sense that it's here. And also knowing the show and how it develops, it feels odd, I think.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of like the original series episodes where like we learn Jim survived like ethnic cleansing and famine and all this stuff.
Bones was married.
And then it's like, anyway, and it's never mentioned again.
Not important. You don't need to worry about that. The first people to ever think about Sam Kirk were the people writing Strange New Worlds. And so also just to revisit what I had sort of shared at the beginning, I just feel like ultimately, as fun as this episode is and as fun as it was to have Q, I don't know that it super makes sense to do a Q story without Jean-Luc. They are narrative foils more than they are like people in the world to each other, right? And so it felt like Q... It was like, what's the point here, right?
Yeah,
and
what
so
is Q's goal?
That sort of brings me to like my biggest question for us, which is like, let's talk about Q. What is his goal in this episode? What are his goals generally? How did it work featuring him in an episode of Deep Space Nine? Like, let's break that down.
I agree. I think there are fun moments with Q. I think overall, there's a reason he doesn't come back again in Deep Space Nine, because this is the only Q episode of Deep Space Nine. And yeah, he doesn't really make sense in this context without Jean-Luc Picard.
Yeah.
It's funny to say, like, what are Q's goals? Because, like, his goal is to cause problems on purpose. Like, that's kind of his main goal with humanity regardless. It also makes me think of the Horrible Goose game. Like, it is a beautiful day in the village, and you are a horrible goose.
Jesus Christ.
It is a beautiful day on Deep Space Nine, and you are a horrible Q.
That's a t-shirt waiting to happen. That's really good. Yeah, I get that. I guess I have always felt like the I'm here to cause problems on purpose thing for Q was like part of the act, I guess, where like it's not that he doesn't enjoy causing problems on purpose. I think he definitely does, and that like a lot of the reason why he does things is for enjoyment. But I don't think we can ignore the fact that Q's entire existence in Trek is a part of this framework of the trial of humanity, which starts in Encounter at Farpoint, and then there is a reveal. Sorry, again, spoilers for a 30-year-old show if you haven't watched TNG, but there is a reveal in the finale of TNG that it's like, all of this has been the test. It never ended. It's ongoing. And then Q makes appearances in Star Trek Picard more recently. And it's like, that's the, like, life is the trial, right? Yeah. Like, you are, you know, humanity is still proving in this state of trial now. And so I feel like I have to try and look at this like in some way from that perspective. And the reason he's in this episode is fully just because of Picard. Like, he is
as always.
as always, yeah. He like, that's what is sort of what doesn't work about it, right? Is that like everything is about Picard, but he's not in the episode. And so it's all sort of filtered through Vash in this way that like just doesn't quite the pieces work. Just don't quite add up for me. Yeah. I think the trial element is clearly I noted many times throughout, like, it's basically the plot from Encounter at Farpoint, which is that for like a super quick summary, the like underground torture guy from The Princess Bride is like, do you want a space station? We got a nice space station for you, Starfleet. Come check out this space station. And we come check out the space station, and it's having all these problems, and Picard is like, Q, stop causing problems. And he's like, moi, I didn't cause the problems. Like, and it turns out,
happened to be here.
Oh, the problem is like human industrial development, and the
problem was capitalism.
Yeah, the space station was a space jellyfish that had been like subjugated by the Princess Bride guy,
as one does.
And so we had to like let it go off into space and be a space jellyfish. And
maybe the manta ray goes to find the jellyfish.
That's what I'm wondering. I feel like they've gotta be
they got
cousins
the marine
or
space animal vibe going.
Yeah, they're hanging out with the crystalline entity somewhere, just like their coral reef.
Of space.
Yeah. But so there is this sort of like environmentalism angle there, I guess, which is like, I think part of the reason he sticks around for the stuff that feels like the trial, right? Like the stuff where it's like, oh, wouldn't you like to know, what the answer is? You're all blaming me when, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But the emotional reason for him being there is because he misses Picard and like wants to just like be with Picard all the time, and I think doesn't know what to do with those feelings, and so is like, I'm gonna stalk this woman to the Gamma Quadrant and back.
Instead of facing my feelings.
Yeah, it's very well, do you have more to say about that before I go on? Because I feel like
No.
Okay. It's very so I always think about, just I think because of the Patrick Stewart of it all, I always think about Charles and Eric, Professor Xavier and Magneto, when I'm thinking about
Jean-Luc and Q.
Yeah, where it's not the same dynamic, but it's very like these two old gay men that can't stop making their relationship problems everybody else's
problems.
Yeah.
We had a breakup and everyone is going to suffer for it.
Exactly. And similarly, in the Charles and Eric relationship historically, if you are not an X-Men person, bear with me because this is our podcast.
And we're going to talk about what we want, baby.
There is usually a woman that sort of serves as like a third point of that triangle. So like Xavier and Magneto first meet in Haifa after the Holocaust, where Charles is irresponsibly doing like telepathic therapy on people to like cure their Holocaust trauma, and starts dating his patient Gabrielle Haller, and she becomes this like third point, right, for them, where like they both have a relationship with each other, they both have this relationship with Gabrielle, and it's like, yeah, we're all just kind of hanging out, don't ask too many questions about it.
Yeah.
And then more recently, Moira McTaggart is a character who's sort of been in that role, but there's always this like, it's about the three of us, but it's really
about these two men.
Yes, and it also feels very in the X-Men vein, Scott, Logan, and Jean, where it's like, oh wow, we've sure got a lot of sublimated stuff being expressed through our mutual like desires for Jean Grey here. And it all sort of comes back to this like concept called the homosocial triangle, which is this idea that like men are getting out these feelings for each other in triangulating them around this woman. And so I just, that was very much the sense for me of this episode, where it's like everything Q is doing is about Picard, and it's all being directed through Vash, and she's just like, can I stop this ride? I want to get off. Like, I don't want to be here.
I am done with you old queens. I just want out.
And it's like, no, you're in it now, babe. Like, you took the pill. You took the wrong pill.
The wrong pill. The gay old queens pill.
Which, like, usually is the right pill, so I understand why you thought that.
You thought it was a good choice at the time, and that's so fair.
But you were wrong. So, yeah, that's kind of my thought on all of that. What do you think about, like, Q's, like, presence in this episode, his goals? Like, did it work for you any better than it worked for me?
I mean, I like Q so much as a character that I just have fun when he's around.
Totally.
I don't think it works as well without Jean-Luc. I agree with that.
Yeah, it's definitely not that it's not fun. It's just sort of lacking that, like, resonance that a Q story usually has.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I watched a TNG-Q episode, so I don't remember the resonance the same way.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I could also definitely be inflating that, because, like, there is the Sherwood Forest
I
episode.
feel like,
so,
like, especially because that's the last one that I'm, like, thinking of. I'm like, they just played Robin Hood. Like, it was pretty silly.
But it's also, like, forcing Picard to, like, chase around Vash like she's Maid Marian. And it's like, is that what you want, though? Like the episode's called Cupid. Like, I don't know, man.
You know, I imagine when you're, like, an omnipotent, eternal being, it's hard to talk about your feelings.
Well, and that's the thing that's so interesting with Q, right? Is that, like, yeah, the more time he spends with people, the more feelings he has. And that is something that is so alien to the Q's way of existing in the universe that it's very interesting. And we miss out on that here.
We also don't get Q in as many, like, fabulous outfits in this episode.
Yeah,
which is disappointing.
bummer.
Usually he's serving more.
I want a fruit hat or something.
Chiquita banana kind of look.
Yeah, and dancing, overthrowing republics.
Yeah,
we do what
as
we
you
do.
do.
My first note for behind the scenes sort of ties into what I was talking about with this, where the original pitch for the episode was basically a Vash story, and the writer's room sort of decided to integrate Q later because they were, I guess, looking to do a Q story, and they're like, well, if we have Vash, the last we saw of her was she went off to parts unknown with Q, like, that's a perfect way to pull him in without it feeling forced.
Yeah.
And I get that, because it would feel forced normally, because because Q's only reason of showing up is to bother Picard. It's personal. But so while I understand why they wanted to do this, I don't think it quite works.
I love this behind the scenes story. There's an outtake in the fight scene between Cisco and Q, and John Delancey replied to Avery Brooks's order to bring back the Deep Space Nine inhabitants instead of like, or what, you'll ravage me?
I don't know what he says, but
in the outtake he says, or what, you'll ravish me? And he starts to laugh and he apologizes, and Avery Brooks replies, I might.
And that's the vibe. That's
the
like the
vibe.
vibe of Deep Space Nine right there.
Oh, so
John
good.
Delancey immediately understood the assignment upon coming on board. All right. Lastly, for our design corner element of our final analysis, this is where we talk about the set, costume, sound, overall production pieces that we really enjoyed. Do you want to start off, Steph, or do you want me to go?
Yeah. So like we talked about earlier, the auction outfit, hairdo,
So good.
earring necklace, loved that look overall.
The blue color of the dress is just gorgeous.
Great color on her. Not super impressed with the Gamma Quadrant artifacts.
No, they weren't like
Yeah.
all that interesting for this being
more.
this idea that like they're so immediately visibly valuable.
Yeah, and like
they were
alien and rare.
They're just kind
Like,
of
it's a
trinkets.
dagger?
Yeah, a necklace, a
Okay.
gold necklace. Like,
Yeah.
all right. No, I'm definitely with you on that.
But the auction bidder aliens are great.
They are. Specifically, the auction bidder alien with the scary lizard beak and the long white hair is my new insomnia demon. Like, amazing work. I hate you so much for that. And also that waiter from before, the like yellow snake waiter.
I
Just
also
looked
love
really
the
cool.
ones who have their heads wrapped in like a blue
Oh,
silk and
yeah,
we don't
yeah,
see
yeah.
their faces. That was giving TOS, the sparkly stuff on their
That was giving
jackets.
very, very TOS.
I enjoyed that immensely.
It was sort of, it was very TOS in the way that it's like alien, but also very clearly visually inspired by like certain Earth cultures that like are from like desert areas and need to like, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I liked those as
That was
well.
good. That was good.
Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of the ride for this week.
Our closing.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this episode and our discussion of Q-Less.
As always, we have one final segment left in today's episode, a little something we like to call Consulting the Orb of Prophecy,
Woo, 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 woo.
where we look ahead into the future of the series and discuss spoilers that relate to this week's episode.
If you have watched Deep Space Nine before, or you just don't mind the spoilers, stick around after we sign off for that discussion. If you're watching along with us for the first time and don't want to be spoiled for future episodes, you're going to want to hop off after the sign-off.
The Star Trek Deep Space Nine Parmach cast is recorded in San Diego, California, and produced by us, as well as our station assayer, Peter.
A big thanks to friend of the show, Matt, who produced our theme music, and to Tumblr user at GrandCon221B, whose Star Trek pick crew was used to generate the avatars of us featured in the show's cover art.
New episodes drop every week on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
If you have any questions, comments, or would like to chat with us about Star Trek, you can email us at ds9cast@gmail.com.
You can also find us on Instagram and Twitter at @ParmachCast for updates and memes.
Last but not least, if you're enjoying the show, please review and give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other folks to find the show, and please join us next week for our discussion of Deep Space Nine Season 1, Episode 7, A Dax. Bye! We'll see you next time.
See you later.
to Consulting the Orb of Prophecy, the segment where we move outside of our linear existence and talk about the future. And the first future thing that we got to talk about is that, unfortunately, this is the last ever appearance of the character Vash.
So sad.
Such
Great
a bummer
character.
to leave her on that note. Would have loved to see her back, or maybe even pop up in the Delta Quadrant to sleep with Janeway. I would have thought that would be great.
That would be perfect.
And actually, we could just imagine that happened, because I'm probably not rewatching Voyager anytime soon.
And I've never seen it, so
there you go.
For all we know.
Anything you wanted to talk about today, Steph, in terms of Consulting the Orb of Prophecy?
I do think it's funny knowing what we know about Julian as, a genetically enhanced human, and he only made salutatorian.
Yeah. I can't remember. I wish I had thought to check this. I can't remember if that ends up being a reveal that was on purpose or not. I will have to check that. But yeah, I think it's season 6, we learned that a lot of sort of Julian's past is recontextualized.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that was I am trying to
be normal.
Yes, to be it's very like The Incredibles when they're Dash get second place.
Yeah. That's fair.
But it is interesting that whole the arc of him being salutatorian and mistaking the post-ganglionic fiber for the pre-ganglionic nerve, it will come up.
And his parents are like, "What do we pay for?"
Right. I think that you could very much take the Q and Cisco boxing match in this episode as Q sort of taking the opportunity to size up the emissary of the prophets and sort of, knowing everything that Cisco will go on to do, taking the chance to go mano a mano with him. I think that's something that would appeal to Q very much. And I also think that Q and the prophets would find each other so annoying. They would not be friends.
He would think the whole speaking as the people's fellow humans
so
was
irritating,
so stupid, and dramatic and unnecessary.
Which is so funny because bitch.
Oh, he loves the drama, but he's well, I do it right.
Right. Space pot meet space kettle.
Yeah.
So I just would like to imagine those interactions now, and I'm also a few months at this point behind on the IDW Star Trek comics, and I'm curious to see if those end up having any of that, because we have seen the Prophet so far and we have seen Q so far. So
well, we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
One last thing I wanted to note, it sort of starts out in a behind the scenes space, but moves into a future thing. Ira Stephen Bear commented about this episode that Michael Piller likes to give challenges out to the writing staff, and that the challenge in Q-Less was to write a scene that took place entirely in Vash's quarters. So that's the scene where all the people are coming in and Q has to keep disappearing. And, he said, I want to take that as long as you can go, make it as funny as you can, and keep people coming in, and I think it worked really well. And
it's a great bit.
Yeah. What I think is really interesting about that, though, it's just so interesting and wild to hear him talk about this moment in this episode, because it's very clearly the same gimmick as possibly my favorite scene in the entire series from season 2, episode 2, where Kira is packing up because she has been replaced by Lee Nollis as DS9's first officer, and her quarters becomes a revolving door of pretty much the whole main cast, and they're all talking over each other and finishing each other's sentences, and Julian's still trying to get caught up on what this conversation even started as. It's very theatrical. It very much feels like watching a play. And Bareil arrives, and Kira sort of says, "Oh, no, come on. These are just," takes a moment and surveys the room and goes, "These are my friends."
I love that moment so much.
It's so good. And I love that that specific style of comedy is something that Ira Stephen Bear is very good at, clearly, and also enjoys, because it makes sense. Oh, that exact beat came back for that episode later.
It's giving Noises Off.
What's that?
Oh, have you never seen Noises Off? It's a great play. It's a play that goes wrong play.
Oh.
It's so funny. It's
okay.
Great.
That sounds really interesting. What happens in it?
Well, it's just revolving doors, people coming through on the set and things happening. It's that kind of bit.
I will definitely have to check that out. Yeah, I always love that sort of thing where it's the energy on stage almost becomes self-sustaining.
Yeah.
It's just always a really fun little beat.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else?
No, I was saying to you earlier, not too many like future things in this episode.
Yeah, it's a pretty standalone because unfortunately the two big characters, we never see them again in the show. So, but it was fun to have them and fun
we
to...
had a good time.
Yeah,
a good time was had by all.
Absolutely. All right. Well,
gang.
with that, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.